Everybody is doing well. It's a time for another online dinner party on a Wednesday afternoon. Yours truly, Mark Lee, will be hosting the party and seeing what folks drop by and what kind of fun conversations and all along those lines that we have and all in that space. I do know a lot of people are paying attention to a number of things, including what is going on in U.S. politics and what is happening with the weather, because it is definitely very hot outside. I just actually stepped outside, even though it's better than it's been, but it's still a little bit the warm side, but we can expect that in the summer and all along those lines. So we can definitely expect some warm weather. I think last month, July, they said was one of the hottest ever, if not the hottest ever of all time. So definitely that is something that folks are talking about and thinking about and all in that kind of way. I know one of the other things that I should have known, but sometimes you forget, and all along those lines is that, it's great to have these great dishes that are good for you during the summertime, a nice refreshing drink, a nice watermelon, and a number of other things. But guess what? If you don't eat it in time, they go bad. So that's what I learned because I went into the refrigerator, getting ready to delve into another one of those dishes. And fortunately, I got some others that were delivered in time that will make up for the ones that are late. So that's what I learned. So definitely that is something that is important to know and all in that kind of way. So definitely that is something that is all in that particular watermelon. That's what happens, and just kind of go with the flow, as they like to say, about thinking in that space. And of course, we'll have some fun conversations, and they might the other thing that can go wrong is technology. So you got to love it when technology goes wrong as well and all in those spaces. So as I was saying, sometimes things are cooperative, sometimes things are not as cooperative and all in that kind of way. So, oh, there we go. As I was saying, the other thing that can go wrong sometimes is technology. You got to love it when technology wants to cooperate. Sometimes it doesn't want to cooperate. Sometimes it does, and all along those lines. But definitely, as I was saying earlier, I was enjoying and getting ready to enjoy some of that fine, delicious food, and the delicious food wasn't ready to be enjoyed. Fortunately, I ordered from the produce box, and they sent me some more food that might be ready to be delivered now, and all in that space. So to make up for that I forgot one of the key rules, which is, you might want to eat the food before it goes bad, and all along those lines. So that was something that I forgot. So I had to get rid of the kind of the food that was not in the best of shape, couldn't be rescued. It wasn't going to help any homeless person or a number of other folks. That I do know that even some of the baseball teams around the world and around the country and everything will provide some food that is left over to those that are in need and everything. But hey, if it's not any good, it's not going to do them any good either, and all along those lines. So this was beyond rescue and all in that space. So like I said, we've got some other guests, but I'm going to start off with Merrick, and I've also got some others as well that'll be joining the conversation. But Mr. Rosenberg, glad to have you here with me. Like I said, a little bit of a glitch to get us started and everything, but hey, that is the nature of life. And as you like to say, personality plays out in everything we do. So I know that you talk about
great,
that.
Great to be here. Things happen, right? What can you do?
Exactly. So those personalities play, and we see personality politics even in the whole thing around politics, which I mentioned earlier. And I know that you have even said that personality plays in a number of things, whether it is in our day-to-day lives, whether it is in our relationship with our family. If you're fortunate enough to have kids, I've only got nephews, don't have any direct offsprings of my own, but I do have those nephews and cousins and a number of others that are figures that I like to think that I am mentoring in one way or another, and all in that space. And I'm sure that sometimes they are enjoying my personality, and sometimes they're going like, that Mark guy, he must just be a little bit off, and all in that space. But what is your thoughts around this whole notion of personality? Because I know that that's something that you talk about quite a bit, is personality.
Yeah, for me, as you said, personality plays out in everything that we do. And I just tried to make it easy so people can understand what is obviously a very complicated and complex topic of understanding who we are. I mean, people spend our whole lives trying to understand ourselves, but I've tried to make it simple, and I break it down to what are 4 core styles, and then I linked them to 4 birds just to make it visual and simple and fun. And so I'll give you a little test here and see what you think. So Let's start off with the eagle. So if a person had the traits of an eagle, what do you think they would be like?
I mean, when I think of eagles as being very regal kind of animals, very much in the kind of like the bird version of a lion. So they're very regal and very like have a leadership quality, because I definitely think of eagles in the sense of there being a lot of pride, because the eagle is part of the symbol of the United States and all along those lines. So I would think there would be somebody that was a true leader. And that was the first thing that I would think about with an eagle.
Yeah, exactly right. They're kind of take charge. They're direct. Someone who is the traits of an eagle is assertive. They're results oriented. They want to make things happen. So that's the first one. The next one is the parrot. So picture a person who has the parrot style. Mm-hmm. What do you think that person would be like?
I mean, I'm imagining a parrot, because when I think of parrots, I think of things that copy a lot, because I mean, the parrots, and there are other animals that do this as well, but they are very much copying what other folks are doing. So if the eagle is the leader, the parrot is probably the one that is definitely a follower, but just not a follower, but also a copycat of a lot of things as well. So they might be trying to put on the airs of having those leadership qualities, even though they might not necessarily have the leadership qualities themselves. So that would be my guess around the parrot.
Right. And what's interesting is really anybody could be a leader, but what's interesting about the parrot is for them, I mean, pick up their talkativeness, their energy, the charisma. If somebody has the parrot style, they're optimistic, they're very social, they're not solitary beings. They want to be with others. Right. So now imagine someone who has the dove style. Like, first word that comes to mind when you think of dove, what do you think?
Well, usually when I think of the dove, because the dove is another animal that is associated with something in the world, and the dove is usually associated with peace, because usually that is part of the symbol of peace and the symbol of unity. So I'm usually thinking of a very pleasant animal, an animal that is trying to be somewhat peaceful, and definitely trying to be kind of warm and all in that space, because that's usually what I associate the doves with, is that symbol of peace.
Yeah,
And of
exactly
course,
right.
the soap.
They're the person in your family who's the peacemaker. They
Right.
want everyone to get along. They want everyone to be happy. They're all about harmony. And we see them in the world as symbols of love and compassion. They have empathy. So the last one is the owl. So when you think of an owl, what comes to
Well,
mind?
like I said, another bird that is associated with stuff. And owls are usually seen as very wise, having a lot of wisdom and all in that space. So I think the owl would be the, we're talking about leadership qualities, that would be the one that is the person that you go to for that sage advice. So a lot of times we are looking for sage advice. They might even be the ones, because owls oftentimes are pictured as being more mature than the other folks. So they were the ones that you would go to get advice, and maybe you can gather from the mistakes that they made in the past, because they are seen as the wise ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting about owls is they're all about knowledge and information. They have a process and a plan and a system. If they're going to do something, they're going to do it right. So essentially, we've got four styles. We're not just one of them, we're a mix of all of them, but there's probably one or two which are home base. Are you
Right.
the more direct and assertive eagle, the more energetic and charismatic parrot, the more soft spoken, compassionate dove, or the logical and analytical owl? And so, as we think about the styles, they play out everywhere, as you said. I mean, it could be at work, it could be at home, it's with our friends and our family. It plays out in sitcoms and TV and books and movies and politics. So, our style and personality plays out everywhere. And the goal is to make it fun and make it easy so we can learn about ourselves and the people in our lives.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Going to bring in some of the other guests, but you mentioned politics, and I guess some people are concerned about a couple of things. Because if you use the bird analogy and everything, I know that there are some folks that are looking at the way that the United States is going, and even the world, and they're seeing outside of the populist conversation, and they're wondering if we're not becoming too divisive and everything. And then there's some people that might look at even the age of the candidates, and they may be right or they may be wrong. But I know a number of folks, including some that are in my peer group, and I'm in my early 60s, but definitely some that are even in those younger peer groups, that are going like, do we really want to cranky owls? Because there's also the notion of the cranky owls running the country and all in that space, because both of those are older gentlemen that are heading toward a rematch, the best way that we can put it and everything, because it looks like we're heading toward a Trump Biden rematch. And both of those are, no matter what your side of politics are, they're not exactly spring chickens, if I can go and continue your bird analogy and all along those lines. And there are a lot of folks that are wishing that we would have some infusion of youth energy and youth ideas and all in that space. But I'd love to hear your thoughts in with the bird analogy and the personality analogies, because both of them, well, one has a whole heap of personality. Some people would say he's very charismatic and everything. Some people would say that the other one has a different kind of personality, kind of like that wise old grandfather kind of image, or the doting uncle, and all in that space and all in that kind of way. Now, whether you agree with those analogies or not, that is what I am hearing from the grapevine, is people would put that kind of thought pattern out there. And definitely a lot of people think of charisma as being part of personality. And definitely there are those that would argue that Clinton had some charisma. Definitely there are those that would say that Trump has a lot of charisma. And there are even those that would say that in the past, Obama, and both Obamas actually, Michelle and the former president, have a lot of charisma. And we can even go into folks like Tyler Perry and Oprah. So how much does charisma play into the personality conversation as well?
Oh, it's everything. I mean, it's you look back in time and look back at the most recent elections. You've got somebody like Trump, and just put politics aside and look at personality. Trump has a big personality. He's really the eagle. And Biden, although throughout his career was very parrot-like, he was very talkative and had a big laugh. And sometimes he would make some verbal gaffes. It's a thing that parrots do. They think they speak out loud and then they say, "Oh no, did I say that?" And they've got to reel it back a little bit. But he's in later years has actually become much more of a dove. And in this past few years, you really see that kind of soft-spoken, grandfatherly kind of compassionate, empathetic style coming out. And why that's important is that, as you said, charisma wins elections. Eagles and parrots win presidential elections when they go against doves and owls. It happens over and over and over. In fact, if you were to go back all the way, 22 elections, all the way back to 1932, every time you have an eagle or parrot, they beat a dove or an owl in every election, all the way back to 1932. The Trump-Biden past election, I think in a way is maybe an exception, but I think a lot of people were looking at Biden as still kind of having that parrot energy because we didn't see him as much throughout the pandemic. And I saw him as that parrot because that's how I had always seen him in his career. Only now am I seeing, he's actually become more of a dove. Sometimes we change our style over time. So it's very interesting because charisma does win elections, and it happens every time if they go against that quieter, soft-spoken dove or owl.
And it's not just on the presidential side, because you were saying that, I was thinking to myself, and I did not ever run for school office or student body president or anything like that, whether I was in college or high school, but it is always those charismatic ones, and sometimes they weren't always the best ones, that won the office of student body president or some of the other offices that can be out there in the college clubs and a number of other things, because a lot of times they are the more popular one and are able to play into that popularity. And all along those lines, it's kind of like that star athlete might be a person that's going to win the school board presidency if they decide to run versus the scientific nerd. And that's just kind of what I've observed and everything along those lines.
You make a very good point. I'm not saying that eagles and parrots make better presidents. I'm saying they tend to win. In fact, if you were to go back in time, you would see that the first 6 presidents of the United States were all owls. Every one of them, from George Washington, John Adams, Jefferson, all owls. The 5 presidents leading up to the Civil War, including Abraham Lincoln, all doves. And we had some amazing presidents. We would lose 3 out of the 4 presidents on Mount Rushmore if we didn't have dove and owl presidents. And so the reality is that we may have a personality bias, and we might be screening out good people who would do an amazing job in the White House, but we're voting for charisma and big personalities. It's really a big personality contest. We're screening out people who are more reserved and don't have those flashy sound bites in the media. And that's a problem. We may be losing good candidates that would do a fantastic job as president.
Yeah, and it's not just here in the United States, but I would argue it's worldwide. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about this and where you would put either Putin or Zelensky, because I mean, there are some folks that would argue that with his military background, Putin might have some charisma as well coming out of Russia. Zelensky definitely has a lot of charisma, being a former actor and all along those lines. So I'm thinking that in some ways they both might be eagles, and that might be part of the problem, because I know that even in the wild, 2 eagles clashing against each other can be a very vicious fight that can go on for a long time, and sometimes you don't know who has won at the end of said fight and all along those lines. So in this case, it might be 2 eagles that are going up against each other. We're using that kind of bird personality, but I'm just wondering your thoughts around that.
That's exactly correct. I mean, you take a look at somebody like Putin, what happens is when you dial up the energy of a style and push it into the red zone, your strength becomes your weakness. So if you have confidence, but you push it too far, it's arrogance. If you are take charge and that assertive leader, push it into the red zone, become the dictator. So I think that's what we've seen, is that, yes, he may have the eagle style, but it's not the healthy version of a confident leader. Like a FDR is just a great example, or Teddy Roosevelt, great examples of confident, assertive, take charge eagle leaders. A Churchill, Margaret Thatcher. These are confident eagles. Push it into the red zone, it's a problem. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing with Putin, is that he's just pushed it too far.
No, I can definitely agree with you on that. Just one of the questions, I want to bring up one of our other guests as well and hear what your thoughts are. But I know that one of our founders, Kim Calhoun, oftentimes talks about the nature of women as leaders, and she sometimes feels that women are better leaders and all in that space. And she sometimes says that they won't make the same decisions that men have made and all into that kind of thought pattern. But there have been some very strong leaders. You just alluded to one of them. A lot of people would say that Margaret Thatcher, whether you saw her as the iron-fisted kind of lady leader and all in that space, was a great leader. There's others, including some from England, that might not have liked her leadership style. And there are people that I know definitely are not fans of Jacinta Ardern down there in New Zealand, but there are others that are adamant followers and adamant lovers of her. So do you think that there are personality differences that come into the gender conversation as well? And then I'm going to ask Marlene if she sees herself as either an owl, an eagle, or one of the other birds that we've been talking about as well. But what are your thoughts around the whole notion of women leadership and where they fit into the personality conversation?
Well, what's very interesting is after a study of over 10 million people, one might think that there are more. I mean, if we just go to stereotype, there are more men who are eagles, more women who are doves. Absolutely incorrect. The data, there is zero correlation between gender and style. What there is a correlation is how we perceive men who are eagles versus women who are eagles, and men who are doves versus women who are doves. And, I think back to my grandfather in the 1970s, and he was a dove. And I remember I used to fly down to, I'm in New Jersey, I used to fly down to Florida, and we would go visit them, and we would see them every Christmas. We would fly down, and then he and my grandmother would drive up to visit us in New Jersey. And every year I'm standing at the gate. There's no TSA at this point. There's no Homeland Security. They're waving goodbye to us as we're walking onto the jetway. And every year I could look back and I could see tears in my grandfather's eyes. And my grandmother, who was the eagle, is like whacking him. She's like, Abe, they're not dying. You're going to see them in July. And the problem was it wasn't socially acceptable for a man to be that dove in the 1970s. Today, father's videoing his daughter on a stage and he has a tear in his eye. And you'd say, how sweet is that? Same holds true with women. It wasn't as socially acceptable if you had a woman in the workplace in the 1950s and she was a strong, assertive eagle. That wouldn't have been as socially acceptable as it is today. I'm not saying we're there yet. And that's actually one of the challenges that women who are eagles have, is that whereas a man may be perceived who is an eagle as assertive, a woman who is an eagle can be perceived as aggressive. And so it's not that there are gender differences. It's just that what we accept in society is different based on style and based on gender. And if you look at presidential elections, it puts some women eagles at a deficit because they are perceived differently than men. And it's unfair. It's a personality bias. We should be viewing men who are eagles and women who are eagles with the exact same lens, but we still have some room to go.
Hey, Marlene, you are definitely in an area of the business community that is very much full of all kinds of charismatic leaders. Some people would even argue that Trump came out of that particular field. Definitely Ronald Reagan came out of that field, because you've been very much involved in the entertainment field. You've definitely done a lot of work in that space, being a comedian or doing comedy, working in the film festival industry, and of course having that love of that great dog of yours, who I'm assuming must be a pink poodle, since we call the company Pink Poodle Productions, and all in that space. So I guess the first question I got to ask you is, which side of the personality does your dog fall on, and which side do you fall on? So is your dog the leader of the family and all along those lines? And definitely, are you seeing yourself as an eagle, dove, owl, or I forgot the fourth animal, but are you seeing yourself in that parrot? Are you seeing yourself in that regards as well?
Wow, so many questions. Thank you. Thank you for empowering me to talk. I see myself as a pink poodle. So I'm going to have to adjust my mindset a little bit to think like a bird. If I did have to qualify myself as a bird, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the musical called The Music Man, but there's a number in The Music Man, pig a little, talk a little, pig a little, talk a little, pig, 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 talk a lot, pig a little more, where the women are all they're all gossiping like chickens, I guess. Maybe that's mine, a chicken. I don't know if that falls into. I'm no cheap.
Sounds very parrot-like.
Okay, parrot.
The talkative parrot.
Okay, then maybe that's me. Although my heart belongs to poodles and poodle Bichons, because my dog is actually a poodle Bichon mix. So she identifies as both depending on the situation. For example, it suited us to call the company Pink Poodle Productions because we love pink and it just sounds good. The alliteration, Pink Poodle Productions. But Blanche, that's her name, has a a movie career too, and her debut motion picture is called Blanche's Bichon Buzz. A Bichon Buzz is a quality that is very common in Bichons when they get happy. In other dogs, they call it zoomies, but the buzz is particular to the Bichons. So she does that. So that's just, we're flexible that way. But Blanche is definitely an alpha. She's 7 pounds of alpha fury and fluff too. And she's very opinionated and aggressive. So I just try to follow along, not cause trouble. And she's definitely the boss.
Sounds very eagle-like to me.
Yeah, it sounds like the dog is very eagle-like, but
yes.
You just brought up something else that as you were saying that, I was going like, that's a conversation that humans have been having for a while, but I didn't know that our animal kingdom was having that conversation as well, because you said that the dog can identify as one species or another, and I know that that's been the whole conversation around people's identity and whether they want to identify in whatever way they want to identify. So I never think of dogs as doing that, or even birds as doing that. So do we have this conversation as well, that we can see the animals self-identifying? Because I know that there are people, even without, we can get out of the sexuality, but that is part of the conversation. But I know folks that have mixed heritage and they will identify more with one side than the other. Like I primarily identify African American, as does most of my family and everything. We might be light and bright, as the old saying goes, but I have cousins that will accentuate more to the Indian side, and we don't. Those of us in my family don't deny that we have some native as part of our heritage, but they pretty much identify strictly as the native side. So they attend a lot of the powwows and go to a lot of the powwow activities and are very immersed in the native culture. But I never think of dogs and other animals as trying to identify or self-identify one way or the other. I figured a beagle was going to be a beagle, a poodle was going to be a poodle, a German shepherd was going to be a German shepherd. But you bring up a new concept that they might want to identify as something other than what they are.
Yes. Well, I think of dogs as just little people in dog suits. So if you think of them more like people, and to be fair, Blanche really identifies as a pit bull, but that doesn't really serve either of us very well. It's not socially acceptable, and I try not to encourage that part of her personality. So, but she truly is a Bichon Poodle mix, which are very close breed. They're also close cousins to the Maltese, another breed of white, fluffy little dog. And there's also, let's see, there are a few of them, but Bichon, Maltese, Poodle, they're all sort of intertwined. And she's a rescue dog. So really, it's a mystery what she is. We haven't ever given her a DNA test, but the vet says that she's a Bichon Poodle mix. And so I figure that that's acceptable for her to identify. It's up to her to identify as either one or the other. And no disrespect to humans and human identification, but I really do think of dogs as very closely aligned with humans. The more dogs that I meet, the more I realize that they have such human characteristics and unique personalities. So anyway, I hope that explains it, and I hope no one's offended. But
I don't think anybody's offended by that. But Merrick, to that point and everything, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And like I said, I'll bring in some of the other panelists as well. But when I think, I don't have any at the moment. I used to cat sit. Don't tell your dog that, Marlene.
She loves cats. She loves cats more than other dogs.
And I actually like both. I like both dogs and cats. And my dad is a turtle lover. Actually, I think that's his totem animal in some ways, because he has turtles and he is definitely a lover of turtles. He even named his art company partly after turtles, partly after bamboo, because it is called bambooturtle.com is his website and everything. But to her point, Merrick, one of the things that I've seen when I have watched people, because the cat that I cat sat before that couple moved away and everything, they also had a dog, and the dog would go down to the dog park, and it was a very large dog. And all in that space is that some of the smaller dogs do like to be overly aggressive, and they do kind of like, I guess, try to show off their alpha personality, to come back to the personalities, because they know that they can't necessarily take on a pit bull or take on a German Shepherd or a Great Dane, but they like to show off their abilities and give that whole notion of my barking might be worse than my bite, but I'm going to bark really loud so that you are intimidated. So is that something that we as humans do as well?
You know, our size does not determine our personality. I once saw a cat, a little cat. I mean, it must have been like 6 pounds. It still looked like a kitten, stalking a deer. And I just had to watch this. And I'm like, what do you think you're going to do? Like, how are you going to catch the deer? Like, I mean, do you think you're going to take this deer out? I mean, what are you doing? But clearly this cat had eagle mentality, thought it was a lion, and is just going for it. And it's funny because, you know, the beauty of talking about personality is that the 4 birds that I mentioned, they relate to the 4 brain quadrants, and they're the 4 styles that we see all over the world. We've seen them for thousands of years. So we can relate them to these 4 birds. The Native Americans in the medicine wheel related them to 4 different animals, the buffalo and the wolf and so on. And so we see these play out all over the place. So we can relate them to dogs. We can relate them to people. We can relate them to cultures. It's just really fascinating to watch how it's so universal, because personality, as we said in the beginning, plays out in everyone.
Well, it's definitely very universal. As you were just saying that, I was thinking to myself that there was and it might have been one of the cats that I had and everything, but it used to literally, to your point of the cat that was stalking the deer, it used to constantly be chased by a pack of dogs. So the pack of dogs would chase the cat. So the cat would run up the trees. The cat would run up the trees. And I think it did that for probably about a good week, maybe even a good month or something. And then one day the cat had a personality decision and all in that space. So the cat literally started to run up the tree, and then it just like said, wait a minute, why am I doing this? And it turned around and swiped at the dogs with its claws and everything. And I don't think those dogs ever chased that cat ever again, because they were like, you have totally changed the game. And we were liking the game. The game was, we chase you, you run up the tree, and we laugh, and then you go and do the rest of your day. And at some point, the cat had basically, like some humans, had enough. And it was like, I don't like this game anymore. So it changed the game. And as I recall it, I don't think they ever chased it again. So sometimes
we don't know why the dogs were chasing the cat, right? I mean, the cat could have initiated the whole thing.
True. Cat could have initiated the game and then changed the game. So that is quite possible. The cat could have been the ones that started the game and then changed the game in midstream as well, for all we know, and all in that space. So the cat might have been like, hey, just come ahead and chase me, and all in that space. Hey, Marlene, and like I said, I'm going to get to some of the other guests as well. But as I mentioned when I reached out to you, you are in the entertainment field. Actually, one of the people that gets our guests for some of our news shows is one of the founders of the Groundlings, and she was actually on our show recently, and all in that space. And if you said her name, I would remember it. But I know
is it Mindy Sterling by any chance?
It wasn't Mindy Sterling, but I know she does a PR company, and she's been having the PR company for a while, and I'll come up with her name very shortly. But I know she was one of the original founders of the Groundlings, because me and her were talking about the notion of improv and the importance of improv in entertainment. So I was just wondering, because you come from New Orleans, which definitely has a lot of culture as well, but what got you into the whole notion of entertainment and wanted to come all the way out to LA and get involved in comedy and film and all in that space?
I think it was just a love of watching TV as a little kid. And also, my parents took me to a lot of children's theater, and I really bought into it. I had a hard time separating what was happening on the stage with real life. It all kind of blended together for me. And as soon as I was old enough to learn that the entertainment capitals of the world were basically New York and Los Angeles, I made up in my mind that I was destined to move to one of those places. So it took a moment. I lived in New Orleans till I was in my early 20s, and I went to college in New Orleans, and then went to graduate school in San Diego and then moved up to Los Angeles. So it was a multi-step process, but I've always loved the business and all aspects of the business. So performing was the original goal, but it's morphed into all kinds of things through the years.
Yeah, it sounds like it's morphed into all kinds of things. What is your thoughts around the writer's strike? Because we do talk about a number of things, and I know a lot of folks have been following that and concerned, including concerns about AI and things along those lines, because there are some people that are afraid that some of those industry jobs, including being writers, may be taken over by some of these outside things like AI. But I just wondered your take on this whole conversation.
It is disturbing, especially the fact that the strike, starting with the writer's strike, it's dragging on for so long. And I understand both sides. I'm not in the writers union. I am in the Screen Actors Guild. But it's funny because I work as a producer and a creative executive a lot. And so I have to take my actor hat off sometimes, a lot of times, probably most of the time, and put on my producer hat and think of what is good for the production, or what is good for the project, or the essentially whoever is paying my paycheck at the moment, what is the good of that particular stakeholder. So I know these are not easy issues to resolve. It might seem rather trivial for people who are not in the entertainment business, but I guess, it's unfortunate that it's taking so long for the sides to reconcile. And I'm not an insider on the negotiations, but I just hope and pray that it's over soon, because a lot of work is being lost to the strike.
No, definitely a lot of work is being lost to the strike and everything along those lines. You know, a lot of people, and one of the things we talk about on the network, meaning Pod TV, a lot is the nature of fiscal literacy and the importance of fiscal literacy. And of course, the whole things that we've been talking about is around show business in this particular part and everything. And there are a number of folks that wonder if we are teaching enough about the business side of show business to our musicians, our entertainers, and a number of other folks as well. So I'm just wondering, this is actually for both of you, if you feel that we are doing enough of a good job to get our schools to actually concentrate and to learn some of these skills that are very important. I would even argue that some of the creative skills are very important because they can teach you critical thinking, even though some people may argue against that. But I actually personally think that if the skills that you can learn from acting, the skills that you can learn from singing and music are things that can help you in critical thinking, even in things that are outside of the creative arts. But what are y'all's thoughts about that? And is that something that we need to do a better job of?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that, living in the world of training and development, I think we don't do a good enough job of teaching fiscal literacy. We see this in sports as well. I've worked a lot with professional sports teams, and I work and teach them personality styles and how to team building, how to work and get along well. But the reality is that a lot of the folks that as they enter into sports, and the same is true in entertainment, they're just not really taught how to manage their money. And they come into a lot of money very quickly, and then it goes away very quickly because they weren't taught those literacy skills around their finances. And it's an issue. It's something that we need to be teaching them. We need to be teaching people the fundamental skills early so they carry them out throughout their entire lives.
No, I definitely agree with you on that and everything. What's your thoughts around that, Marlene, and everything? And I'm going to bring Beth into the conversation as well. And she has some thoughts around a number of things also. And there might be some others that will be joining us very shortly also. But what is your thoughts around it also?
I think that the creative part is the fun stuff. And everybody wants to do the fun stuff. And it's easy to put aside the not fun stuff, which to me is the numbers. I'm not a math person or a numbers person. I'd rather just make pretty things and enjoy them. And I think a lot of people get into the entertainment business because they are creative, and then the more practical skills are pushed to the wayside. And then also, it is a business of tastes. It's often difficult to quantify how many people are going to like the Barbie movie, let's say, because for the past several years, I've heard a lot of disparaging comments about Barbie. So I'm a Barbie collector, so I am always very defensive of Barbie. But I thought, oh, maybe this movie is going to be a giant bomb, because I hear people disrespecting Barbie all the time. Just the conversation, a lot of women my age and maybe, a little bit older, a little bit younger, think that Barbie's not the greatest role model for girls and discourage their children from playing with them. But that all went out the window when the movie came out. So I don't know what the financial projections were for the performance of the movie, but I'm guessing that they far exceeded what anyone, I don't think anybody expected it to be $1 billion film at this early date. And that's great. But it seems like far too often the opposite happens, where people, companies will project something's going to be a massive hit or even a modest hit, and then it'll lose money. So it's difficult, and because it's often a painful process, I think people put that to the side and focus on the pretty pictures and the nice music and dialogue.
Yeah, definitely. One of the other things, and definitely I want to hear from the other guests as well, but one of the other things that I know that you're involved with, and I have some other friends that are involved in this space as well. As a matter of fact, one friend did a fashion show that was raising awareness around autism and autistic neurodiverse individuals. And I know that that is some of your own work experience, Marlene. So what was that like working with those? Because I have a close friend that has actually opened up, I think it was about 2 or 3 years ago, a thrift store that is actually hiring some of the folks that are in the spectrum in that sense, and trying to get them involved in learning a skill that they can take with them even outside of that particular thrift store and all along those lines. And I know here in Durham, we have Bright Star, which is a horse kind of facility that provides some horse therapy to the autistic folks as well. So that is definitely some folks that are doing some very innovative work in those particular lanes. But I was just wondering how you got involved, whether you had family members or children of your own that were in that lane, or what got you involved in even wanting to work with folks that are in the autistic and neurodiverse community.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't have any personal experience, although I suspect that I might be on the spectrum, but that's just my own conjecture. I became involved with a school called the Center for Learning Unlimited, and the school is located in Los Angeles. It's a school for kindergarten through 12th graders on the autism spectrum, and the school's been operational for about 25 years. But about 5 years ago, the founder of the school, her name's Ginny Erxleben, she noticed a lot of talent in art amongst the student body. And during the pandemic, first thing she did, she implemented a career training program for adults on the autism spectrum, so 18 and up, high school graduates, to learn animation as a career option. So she implemented a 3-year certificate program in animation production. And then I was brought on as a consultant, mainly because I had a friend who was an art instructor in the program. And when the first class was getting ready to graduate, they needed some additional training in just practical skills that you need when you graduate from a professional program or college or what have you. They needed to know more about the business, and they had already mastered life drawing and the software programs and so forth. So I came on board as an advisor a little over 3 years ago, and then in that time we also started a studio. So when the folks graduate from the 3-year program, they then move into Brainstorm Productions. And part of my role is to bring in commission jobs that will pay the graduates to do animated projects. So it's been a wonderful experience. I feel that I've learned a lot. I didn't know very much about the autistic population at all, and I learn more every day. And we've done some amazing work together, and more to happen in the Yeah, well, every day something new happens, but we've done some short films and we've illustrated a number of children's books. Interestingly, a number of projects came our way related to cats. So I think we're on our 6th children's book illustration project about cats, all different authors, but that's the common denominator there. And it is wonderful. I feel that I am so fortunate to have had this experience, and I think it's mutually beneficial.
Sounds like it's very beneficial, and all along those lines and all in that space. Beth, share a little bit about what you've got going on in your world. I'm also going to bring Adam on as well very shortly, but definitely I enjoy these great in-depth conversations from different people from different backgrounds, and we've definitely been learning about our different styles of what we might be if we're comparing ourselves to birds. So I know that definitely there's been the whole conversation that whether you're an eagle or an owl or a parrot, and I may have some parrot-like qualities and all in that space, but maybe have some eagle-like qualities as well. But where would you put yourself on those bird spectrum that we were talking about with America?
Probably, I would say owl and dove mixture, probably. Maybe a little bit of parrot every now and then, but I'd say that's probably the best guess I could make, I think. But
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And for those that are watching, if you'll share a little bit about your own journey and some of the things that you are involved in as well, because I do know that you are an award-winning novelist, and actually coming back to the whole conversation around those that are neurodiverse and all of that, you've actually survived something that a lot of folks would find very tragic and would be trying to figure out how they could even deal with it, which is a brain injury, because you were also a brain injury survivor. So I'm imagining that that's part of what the book is about, but if you'll share a little bit about the book and your own story as well.
oh, thanks. Well, first off, it's really been fun to kind of listen in on the conversation with everyone and glean all these different things. So that's been fun. But yeah, but my books, actually, it's funny. My books they don't connect to my brain injury at all. They're just, I've written different novels, different fictional worlds and that sort of thing. But the thing that I would say about with the brain injury in connection to my writing is that I didn't know if I would really be able to write again after it happened. So it was kind of being able to kind of get back into the flow of it, which and just to tell you what happened. I mean, it wasn't a very interesting thing. I'd never fainted before in my life, and it was in a grocery store, and I fainted and I cracked my head open on the floor. So it wasn't that it wasn't a very dramatic thing. But anyhow, it took me a while. I had to go through rehab and this and that, and I was had some trouble reading, and I definitely wasn't writing. So, and the only thing, I mean, it's sort of a strange. I mean, I think of myself, this is not a medical, I'm not a medical professional, and this is not even a doctor would probably maybe have quite a different angle on this, but I've always been a very stubborn person, and I feel like I healed, and I thought I'm also a runner, so I thought I want to run as soon as I can. I'm going to get out there and run, and I got out there and ran again, and then I just said I'm going to just sit down in front of my computer and write again, and eventually I did that. So it was just a lot of healing and a lot of sleeping, if you can believe it, was involved in the healing process. So just stubbornness.
They say stubbornness and sleepiness is probably something that we all need, because they say that we don't get enough of that. They even said that during the pandemic, when many of us were at home, that we didn't get enough sleep, and that's still something that a lot of us still face, is the constant need to want to go. And sometimes you forget the most important thing, which is you have to rejuvenate and re-energize yourself and all in that space, because sometimes I know that I'm even guilty of it. You'll look up at the clock and the clock will say that it is 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes it's even that you're doing things that aren't necessarily part of the protectivity thing, because I'm not going to lie, I sometimes love to play video games, not in the traditional sense that you were talking about, Marlene, but kind of like those ones that are on your phone that are like the puzzle games like Crosstick, and some of the other ones that are puzzle solving kind of things. And sometimes if you're doing that and maybe also popping into a clubhouse room or something along those lines, and then you look at the clock and the clock says, hey, it's 3 a.m. I'm supposed to be up at 8. I don't guess there's going to be enough rest on this particular day, and all along those lines. And I'm thinking that the 3 of you might be guilty of that as well. So how do you do the whole work-life balance thing. And that's for all three of you, because I know that whether you are married, single, or whatever the status may be, you have to have that balance going on. And that's something we've talked about on this show with a number of guests. But how do the three of you, and I'll bring in the fourth guest in a minute as well, bring in the whole work-life balance part of life?
I have no balance at all. It's all work and life. There's no balance. That's why my dog is my business partner. It's a necessity. Or else, if she wasn't my business partner, then I don't know when I'd ever see her. So she's always right here. I guess to your point, and also to the point of having no no clear line of demarcation, I need to sign off because I've got a meeting coming up, and my podcast fun time for today sadly is over. So
I appreciate it, Marlene. Just one thing that I get everybody to do really quickly, and I'm gonna get everybody else to do it as well. I was gonna ask you your advice, if you have any, to those that are aspiring to get into the entertainment field, and I would love to have you come back. But one of the things I get all my guests to do, if they are able to do, is tell how they can be reached. I know that Pink Poodle Productions is your company that you shared a little bit about as well, but if you have any words of advice that you want to give to young people, as well as any the thing that I get everybody to do is a message of positivity and hope. It's just kind of like my own little personal mission that I do with all of these shows, which I give people to give a message of positivity and hope. And then if you can tell folks how they can reach you, and then of course you can go off to your other meetings, because I'm very respectful of people's time.
Sure. So my advice is to be kind to everyone, and also to keep an open mind about all kinds of opportunities that come your way, because you never know where some golden chance will originate. You just never know. So yes, be nice to everyone and keep an open mind. And to find me, I'm at pinkpoodleproductions.com. I'm also a maniac on LinkedIn. I've already sent invitations to link with all of our guests here on the podcast today. So I believe in LinkedIn, and it's really helped me a lot. And I'm also on the usual suspects, Facebook, Instagram, what have you, as Marlene Sharp. So that's me. Thank you so much.
No problem. I hope you'll make a return trip in the near future. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation and your participation in it. And I hope that you will come back in the not too distant future on another one of these online dinner parties. But I've definitely enjoyed your participation on this particular one. And hopefully we'll have you back on a return trip when you are able to make that return trip.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Merrick, and Beth,
Great meeting you,
and
Marlene.
Adam, and Kate, and everyone. And it's been a pleasure. I hope to see you again.
Sounds good.
Take care.
I'll give you an answer to your question, which is how do we find that work-life balance? I think that we just have to put energy into creating the work-life balance. Mm-hmm. That I think what happens is I travel a lot. I speak at conferences all over the world, but everywhere I go, I find a yoga studio that I can pop into, and I make sure I prioritize my own health. And sometimes I'll bring a little ukulele with me on the road, so I have something to enjoy and have some fun while I'm traveling. But I always make sure that I'm eating healthy on the road. I'm finding a yoga studio. Does it take some extra energy and effort? Yeah, it does. But you know what? People all the time say it's really hard to be healthy on the road and prioritize yourself. And I'm like, you know what? It's not. You just have to put some energy into it. So if you are a priority, you find a way to stay balanced. Meditation, yoga for me are just playing musical instruments, keep me centered, and you just have to put energy into making it happen.
No, I definitely agree with you, and I'd love to hear Beth's thoughts and bring Adam into the conversation as well. But Beth, one of the things that you do and that you have done, and some people will get a kick out of the question I'm going to ask, because I work at a cultural arts center that is a converted church. So it is definitely has some ghosts and some other things that are walking around and are definitely making their presence to be known and everything. So I am used to there being some of that metaphysical stuff that goes on in some of the spaces that I work at, because it is a converted church that was built by former slaves back in the late 1800s and all in that space. So it is definitely over 100 or so years old and all along those lines. But that being said, I don't know that I'm necessarily going to walk, because I'm actually trying to avoid this part of destiny. I think that a lot of people are trying to avoid it, even though we can avoid it. I've jokingly said that I'm going to shoot for 200, even though I don't think there might be some characters in the Bible that made it to 200, but nobody that is walking the earth has made it to 200, and I don't think that I will either, since I just hit 61. But I don't know that I necessarily want to follow around a gravedigger. But apparently that's something that you did with one of your novels. So I'm going like, what was that experience like? And apparently you asked him a lot of questions, and I'm going like, I don't even know what I would ask a gravedigger other than, are you ever afraid that one of these people might pop out of the grave and all in that space? And maybe that's one of the questions that you asked him and everything. But what was that experience like? Because I'm going like, wait a minute, she did.
Oh yeah, it was great. So one of my novels called In This Ground is about an indie rocker who ends up, like, his career as a musician crashes, he ends up becoming a gravedigger, and just gets into his life and his dealing with his failed musical career and guilt and all this. But in his research for the novel, I followed around a gravedigger for a day, and it was great because it wasn't just the logistics of his job, but he had so many wild stories of stuff that went on in the graveyard, especially at night, like all kinds of weird things. Like there were people doing voodoo rituals and people leaving weird stuff on graves. And then he would tell me about interesting, things that would go on in the graveyard. Like there was a feud in the family. So these people didn't want their person buried with this person, so he had to dig up the grave because there was a family feud going on even after, somebody had just, died in the family. So there was all kinds of, he was just a real font of stories. So I was able to weave that into the novel. And also it allowed me to realize, like, I've got to have a lot of scenes at night because that's where a lot of stuff goes on. So that was a lot of fun to learn about that and weave it into the book. So, but I'm trying to think if there was any other than the voodoo. That was the only kind of creepy crawly thing that, I remember, or just kind of maybe spooky thing that I remember. But
well, like I said, I can relate because there are times, because everybody that works with me at this particular cultural arts center, the Hayti Heritage Center in Durham, will tell you that they have literally heard, because there have been more recent people that have passed on, and there have definitely been those that passed on centuries ago, or at least a century ago, or definitely multiple decades. And I can't think of a person that has worked there that says that has not said they haven't heard a dance or a music or footsteps that did not make any sense because they were the only one in the building, because it is definitely a older building that has its own ghosts and all in that space. So if there was anybody that did one of those journeys and found out whether there were spirits there, I'm thinking there are several of them. And usually when I leave the office, I have a conversation with them. I tell them that, look, I'm getting ready to leave. So if y'all want to have y'all party, go ahead and have the party, but just wait till after I leave and everything. It's kind of like that, maybe that whole parent concept of trying to be peaceful with the spirits and all in that line. So I have a little bit of a personal conversation with them. And so far they have abided by my requests or my wishes in that space, and nothing has jumped out. And now that I say that, something will probably happen that'll be weird in that space later on. But so far, they have avoided that so far. So that's why I was going in that space and all along those lines. Hey, Adam, tell us a little.
Hey, how's everybody?
Doing good. You've been listening to the conversation in the background, and of course, a lot of folks are watching and are very interested in your story as well. And definitely one of the things I was going to get to Beth, but I'll get to you as well, is for those that are thinking they want to write a book. So I'll start with you, Beth, and then Adam, I'll come back to you as well. But because everybody says they got the great book in them, the great film, and we had Marlene here early and everything, but they all say that they have that, and then sometimes we do that procrastination thing that I was alluded to earlier as well. So what would your advice be to folks that want to be like you and not just write a book, Beth, but you also have we're the founding editor of a book review site, Small Press Picks, and definitely have been a senior editor. And we actually have something in common, because my first media jobs were actually not in radio and television or radio and live streaming, but they were in newspapers, because I have a journalism degree from Marquette. So I actually worked for a few newspapers. So I definitely know about that background, and it definitely helps with the writing background and the reporting background. But what advice would you give to others that are wanting to join your ranks of writing books, be it something like a Marianne Hadley? And you can tell us about that. We just talked about In This Ground, and I'm sure folks will be interested. And I Mean You No Harm, which apparently was the third novel, and the fourth novel, The Inhabitant.
Yeah, which Inhabitants is a ghost story, by the way. So if you want something creepy, that'll be coming out. But yeah, but I would just say for people who are interested in writing. I mean, it's funny. Like I think like maybe for some people they have like they feel like they have a spark of inspiration, but I don't think it really works that way for most people, including me. And I think the only thing you just have to kind of sit with your thoughts and sit down in front of the computer, in front of your paper, and just try to put in the time and just put in the time, and sometimes you'll have great days where, things are flowing, and other days you might just be, working through some things. You might not get that much down on paper, and you're just sort of batting around your thoughts, and just be there. And then sometimes when you're taking a shower or out for a jog or cooking dinner, that's when something will come to you. And, it's kind of those unexpected times where something will strike, but just be present and put in the time. It's probably the best thing I could think of, and not be find a community if you can, like fellow writers that you can, it's kind of, you're not always in your own head, that you could connect with, maybe, critique each other's work, support each other. I think that's really important too. So
it seems that you also have to bear a lot of your soul, because I know a lot of your book also deals with grief, and a lot of people just in general have a hard time dealing with grief, whether it's the grief of a loss of a pet or the loss of a family member or a number of other things, but you are actually bearing your soul even in the novels as well. So is that something that you think is easier for folks to do, or is that even more difficult? Because I would think that would be harder to do than something that comes strictly out of the imagination and doesn't have to do with something as painful as grief can be. And I'm not saying that we all go through grief at one time or another, but it can be a very painful thing. But it's apparently the central theme of all 4 of your novels to some degree or another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's just such a common human experience, and I feel like that, in a way, sometimes writing about it from entering another character's thoughts and world, in a way, I feel like it's more illuminating in a strange way, because I think when we're dealing with our own grief and pain, it's obviously it's difficult, and it's also, I feel like when you're identifying with the character, you feel that too, but it kind of opens up and lets you explore the experience a little more and tap into the sort of the more universal feelings around it. So I'm glad that there is more writing and discussion about it. I feel like in my parents' generation or before, people just didn't really talk about that, feelings like that as much. And I'm glad that we're I feel like we're opening up more about that, which I think is really great. And, I hope that, if anyone reads my handling of grief, that, they feel some connection, and they don't feel, as alone with their grief, maybe. That's what I would say, I guess. But
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Hey, Adam, I know that one of the things you deal with over there in Georgia, and it's actually something that I can resonate with a lot. Like I can resonate with a lot of the things we've been talking about. But one of the things I can resonate with is helping our youth, because while I may not do direct mentoring, I do some mentoring of the kind of like peripheral level through the arts and a number of other things in that space. But my brother is actually a person that has done a lot of work with what some people would call at-risk youth, even though that's a term that I sometimes have a issue with, because I think that we might be adding too much into that whole notion and maybe even creating more risk than they are actually at. And I'm not saying that youth don't have issues, but I mean, it even comes down to like Ritalin and some of the things that we prescribe to our youth. To me, they're just being typical youth. They're being hyperactive, and sometimes we are prescribing things to them that they may not necessarily need. But I just wondered your own involvement with the youth and how you got involved in it, character building and youth development. Because like I said, it's something that very much fascinates me. My brother's been involved with it for probably at least a decade, if not a little bit over a decade. And he even has used it with some of his other loves, because he is a fan of the Polaris slingshots, and they've done some work in both youth activities and other things with that particular kind of group. And if folks are wondering what is the Polaris slingshot, think the Batmobile. So it's those cars that you see running around that look like the Batmobile, and they kind of look like that kind of fancy type car that is used out in a lot of the roads of America and all in that space. But Adam, how did you get involved in youth development?
I started off as a youth pastor, of course, and a lot of the guys I was dealing with, I noticed just like typical people, when they show up to church, they're on tip-top behavior, but apparently they're having problems at home. And it became a deal of mine to spend more time with them, get to know them, find out what's going on in the background. Come to find out, it got me involved in places like the Boys and Girls Club. It got me involved in places, other outside school areas that a lot of kids go where, either they don't have a mentor going on in their life, their parents are too busy, they come from rougher backgrounds, lower incomes, those type of deals. That got me into getting involved in the organization I'm involved in now, which is Glory Bound Athletics. And from there, we made more of a derivative from Glory Bound, which was pretty much just straight athletics, dealing with kids. And this is more of the outreach type, where we were able to take, not only develop youth on the court, but also off the court. And it gives us the ability to go into these communities and deal with these kids that sometimes, the parents are struggling, they're working 2 jobs, and not being able to spend as much time with the kids. A lot of these kids, they end up in the streets. They end up, hanging around with older people who are bad influences. So it gives them an outlet kind of deal. I know it's, for me personally, I come from that same type of background where I grew up a little rough. Luckily, somebody leaned in and helped me. So I felt like it was just right to do unto others as others have done unto me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What exactly are Glory Bound Athletics in terms of the terminology and in terms of what it actually means and everything? And just in contrast to that, and as part of that question as well, do you deal a lot, we were talking about that earlier, with the financial aspect? Because if we think about show business, I would argue the same thing around athletic business as well, because the amount of folks that actually make it is tremendously low percentage wise and everything in that space. So there are hundreds of thousands of folks that are wanting to be the next LeBron James, but that percentage is less than 8% that actually make it in any form of sports or anything along those lines. So is that a part of the conversation that is had, and also is part of the conversation for those that do make it, that they are able to understand their fiscal responsibilities and the ways that they can go and have a career beyond whatever career they have in athletics?
Absolutely. Actually, what we deal with and we try to instill into our kids is, like you said, it is very rare that you go pro. What we shoot for really is to further their education, to be able to get some type of scholarship or help as far as being able to further their education. Because like I said, a lot of these kids come from lower incomes. So if they do graduate, they have the opportunity to further and do better for themselves. So that's the area that we really aim for and we really strive for. Not necessarily going pro, more or less, and not necessarily even going to a D1 school. Maybe just going to a junior college or something like that. Just being able to present to them, and we also do a lot with being able to show them exactly what the scouts are looking for. They're not just looking for the LeBron James. They're looking for team players. They're looking for those who cheer their teammates on, good grades, other activities other than basketball. That's what we do. We try to prepare them to take them to the next level. We understand they're not going from us straight to the pro. We're just trying to make sure that they have a future. They obviously have talent. Let's get them to where they have a future.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Adam, I actually ran track in my high school years, and that was way back when, but I was very bad. I was like worse than Charlie Brown in terms of being on the track team and everything. But one of the reasons that I think there are a couple of things. One, I think that it was in a rural town. So they basically had a rule of we'll run you, and we'll just keep on running you. And if you survive, then you made the team. But I think the other reason that they kept me on the team was I was a good recruiter. So I would go to some of my friends who were on the football team, the basketball team, and a number of other teams and make sure that they were going to run the next year. So some of those leadership qualities that I think I still have is some of the things that I was developing even as a youngster and all along those lines. And like I said, I think it was, and the folks who are watching the show, including y'all, will get a kick out of this. I think it was my senior year that we actually lost the championship because we won 3 out of the 4 years that I participated, but I was tired of losing. So I recruited a friend that I knew I could beat, and I think we lost by about a point or two because I beat him regularly, but we also didn't have anybody that could do the pole vault or the long jump or one of the other races that might have got us those extra points that we needed. So I might have been at fault, but that was a little bit of, to your point, Merrick, it might have been a little bit of that ego thing and being the parent and wanting to kind of like be a person that was going to have at least a little bit of success, even if it was us meeting one person. So I did recruit him, and unfortunately he has passed on and all along those lines. But like I said, kind of might have been champions 4 years in a row if I had not been a little bit on the greedy side in that respect and all along those lines.
There may be a little bit of ego kicking in there, like, I want to shine, I want to win.
Exactly. There might have been some of that ego coming in. Hey, Adam, just really quick, because I know one of the other things that you talk about, and this is not a question for all three of you and everything, is what is the I Am Series podcast? Because I was curious as to what that was. It's a fancy and lovely title. I like the title. I'm going, what is I Am? What is the series? What is this all about? So what is the I Am Series podcast?
Well, the I Am Series is a podcast, which has also moved into short little TikTok videos. And what we do is we try to encourage these kids, not just the ones that we deal with in our small hometown. We try to reach other kids. Of course, TikTok's a huge thing. So the kids that see these videos, like I said, we do a lot of affirmations, a lot of, hey, you know what, I am glory bound and I am valuable. I am glory bound and I am a leader. I am a winner. These are things that some of these kids, unfortunately, don't hear every day. So to be able to lift somebody up that you don't even know is worth it. To me, that's what we're all about. We started out kind of small-minded, where we were just dealing with the individuals in our school, and we realized there's a whole wide world out there that we could possibly make an impact in, and that's what we're currently trying to do.
That makes a lot of sense. I don't know if you're familiar with Bruce George, who is very much involved in the hip hop community and was very much involved in some of the early days of Def Jam and all in that space. But he has something similar called Genius is Common, which is a video that you can see on YouTube. And he has a number of people. And the notion is that we all have our own genius. We may not all be Mensa people, but we all have a skill set that we should be honoring and that we should be celebrating. So you might have somebody that is celebrating the fact that they are a master or a great chef, or somebody that is celebrating, like y'all are talking about, that they are a great athlete, or that they are involved in their music career, or that they're involved in their accounting career. So the notion is that maybe we need to get out of this idea of a genius being an aloft goal, because we all have a genius that needs to be celebrated. It might not be the academic genius, but there are various styles of genius that are out there. So I don't know if you've ever heard that, but if you've not followed it, you might want to look at it, because it is definitely a program that he's been running for multiple years now, and it's a whole YouTube movement, I would say, and all in that space. And there are a couple of other ones that are similar to that as well. So it's this notion that we need to celebrate some of the things that we are not always celebrating, and that seems like what you are doing as well with these TikTok videos.
It is, and also what we tried to get into now is kind of mentoring these kids. Like you said, a lot of them they feel pressured. If you're not going to school to be a lawyer, you're not going to school to be a doctor, then you're not going to make it. What we do is we've taken a lot of these kids that have mechanical abilities, they have other abilities other than things that Harvard or Yale would accept you for, and matching them with somebody who does that job, or matching them with somebody who, because colleges, some of them may not make it to college. So to be able to find their passion and something that they're good at.
And along those same lines, Adam, I know that on our show and in a number of the shows, we've talked about people that have worked as truck drivers, have worked as bricklayers. I actually had a uncle till he passed away not that long ago. That was the entire family, or his family, was involved in plumbing and a number of other things. And in some of these fields, they actually make more money and actually are more stable than some of the doctors or lawyers, because we do know that doctors or lawyers also incur a lot of debt when they go to those schools, and sometimes they don't automatically make it back, and sometimes they may never make it back in all in that space. So there are some folks in the vocational space, and I know North Carolina, I know you're down there in Georgia, but North Carolina prides itself on what they do on the community college and the vocational level, and I think Georgia does the same as well. So there are a number of fields that can be just as lucrative that are in the vocational field. But I'm just wondering your take on that, because a lot of folks ignore what we can do as a success even in our vocational fields.
Oh, I absolutely agree with that. I'll be honest with you, I've made more money on my hands than I ever did with my degree. I've been involved in truck driving and things like that, different careers and things. And that's another thing that we were lucky about, is that where we were located, we were actually 30 minutes from the University of Georgia, which is a very large school. A lot of kids strive to go there. But within our small town, we also have a technical school. So to be able to bring them to the technical school and say, hey, look, they offer this, they offer this program, which you obviously seem interested in. They offer welding, they offer robotics, they offer this. You're not necessarily getting your hands dirty. A lot of them do a lot of robotics and different things like that. Of course, this being the technical age, there's always a high demand for that. Anything to keep them from hanging out on the streets and getting around the bad influences. Being able to kind of push them along and say, hey, you know what, if you hang out here, there's going to be trouble. So it's time to move on. Let's go somewhere else.
Yeah, essentially you said that, because as you were saying that, I was just thinking to myself that some of those information technology fields, because I have some friends that are involved in things like the metaverse and things like robotics, and some of those are not necessarily always college-based careers. I'm not saying that colleges don't teach those fields, but there are some of the technical schools that are doing as much, if not more, in those fields. And like I said, I know some people that don't even have a college or a vocational degree that are doing quite well in some of these fields as well. I'm thinking of like esports, and how some of the ones that are developing and are at the leadership level of these kind of fields are not even in college age yet, because I know that there are some high school and kids that are even younger than that are doing some innovative work in those fields, because it is part of their DNA. It's part of what they grew up in, and they're already very much interested in it even before they've gone to advanced learning. And I'm sure you've even seen that, Adam, in some of the students that you're working with.
Absolutely. The things that these kids are learning on their own is remarkable. I remember growing up, we had Atari, we played Pong. These kids are actually creating video games just for fun. I've seen them on there with coding and things like that. So to watch their minds, if they were given the right environment, there's no doubt in my mind that a few of them would probably be running Fortune 500 companies. Getting them to the point where they do not want to be a product of their environment. That just because I came from here does not mean I have to stay here. That is the mindset that we are trying to instill. A lot of them, they grow up seeing low income, and mom and dad work 2 jobs and things, and it's commendable, but you don't have to go down that route. You can further yourself. You can educate yourself. You can find opportunities. And it's not to look down on anybody. It's to show them every door that maybe they don't see. Maybe they just see what's in front of them.
Yeah, I definitely see it. Just really quickly, and then like I said, I got a question I'm going to ask all three of you and everything. But one of the questions that I was curious about is that there has been, and I know you come out of the Christian and religious base, but there has been some concern that the religious organizations that we've been talking about on some of the other news shows are losing that connection to the youth and all along those lines. And there is a fear that some of our churches are having a aging population in terms of their congregation, and not enough of the youth getting involved. Is that something that you are seeing, and is that something that you think through programs like this can fight the tide of? Because I know that you also have a master's degree in Christian ministry, and I've even talked to other religious leaders, and that is something that they have said that they are concerned about is the fact of some of the youth turning away from the church, and not just the Christian church, but even some of the other faiths as well.
Well, I believe it's correct. I think I heard a statistic one time that said 3 out of 4 will walk away from the church before they graduate. And to hear that is just terrifying, that 3 out of 4 of them will walk completely away. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the churches are dealing more with a lot of religion aspect of it versus relationship with Christ or whatever denomination they may be, or I think a lot of it is that they're so used to hearing pastors and religious leaders preach almost to the point of not having tolerance for other people. That I think now we live in a more open society, and they're not going to put up with that kind of stuff. And that's not what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be to love everyone. So I think it's our jobs now to go back and fix the damage that maybe has been done. I think a lot of these kids are very smart. You can't pull the wool over their eyes, even though they may not have read the Bible. There's a human instinct to say, hey, you shouldn't treat anybody differently. You should not love and respect somebody because of who they are. And I think that's a lot of the kids waking up and hearing that and realizing, well, that's not the way I want to. I mean, that's not right. So I'm not going to deal with that. And that has a lot with the religion aspect rather than relationship.
Hey, Merrick, along those same lines, and I'd just love to hear your thoughts about it, because we started off the show talking about personality and personality types. And when it comes to the churches, and I do have some friends that are definitely in the ministerial community and all along those lines, but a number of times they get frustrated because, including some of the members of the congregation, because to Adam's point, there are a number of churches that it has become like the cult of personality, and it is more about who the minister is and the minister's personality than it is the actual message or the actual actions that are supposed to be taken and everything. And just along those same lines, and just to kind of put a bow in this part of the conversation and everything, my dad, who I mentioned earlier, is an artist, and one of the pieces that he did is called Thoughts and Prayers, and it is a kind of one of those installation pieces that is kind of one of those rebellion installation pieces where you kind of like place it wherever you can get it, that sometimes the art place knows, or the place knows that you're going to put it up, and sometimes they don't. But it is literally like the thing that you pull for a fire alarm, and in it is the thought or the words of thoughts and prayers, because the kind of idea is that a lot of times we will say that we want to give thoughts and prayers whenever there is a tragedy, be it Katrina, be it what's going on in the Ukraine, be it our homeless, and a number of other issues. But sometimes it's a lot of lip service and not action, because I've had friends that have literally reached out to their church communities or church communities in their neighborhood and have been turned away because they would claim that they don't have the resources. I'm not saying they did have the resources, but sometimes you wonder if they just can't open the doors up, and instead of having people laying on the church steps, actually providing cots and all in that space and opening the doors wide to let people in. But I just wondered your thoughts, because you did mention personality as we started off, and a lot of times that cult of personality is part of the conversation that even religious leaders have as well.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is we're actually seeing a generation of children who there's far more doves than we've seen before. And this is a very compassionate style. It's a style that's a very accepting and non-judgmental style. And they're just not going to tolerate places where there's judgment and lack of acceptance. And it's really wonderful to see. I mean, we see it. I see it even in the workplace. When I was younger, if you didn't like your boss, my father worked at the same company his whole career. He didn't always come home every day and talk about how wonderful his boss was or the environment was, but he wasn't going to quit. This generation says, you know what? I don't like this environment. People are judgmental. There's toxic people around me. I don't like the person who I'm reporting to. You know what I'm doing? I'm going to go somewhere else. And I think that if we're watching a generation, especially with millennials and now Gen Z, that's coming in and they're saying, you know what, I'm not going to be in a space that's that's toxic or negative or is judgmental and not accepting of people. And I say, fantastic, like let that shine and let that come through. And I think that they need to hear those messages, and they're going to put themselves in places where that's the energy that resonates with them. And I think that's a wonderful thing, because they're not going to tolerate being in places that don't espouse their own values.
Not exactly, but if they don't have the values, or if somebody is being taken advantage of, I think that some of the youth will actually take initiatives on their own. One of the stories, and we actually featured it on one of our other shows earlier this morning and everything, because it's a late night show, and all in that space is there was a gentleman in Las Vegas that worked for a major fast food chain. I think it was Burger King and everything, and worked there for 27 years and basically got a poultry, like, you get those little gifts and everything. So he got like some poultry items. I think they included some candy bars, a little bit of a chain and everything along those lines. And then his daughter was like, well, this is, man, worked 27 years basically to support us, because I think she was one of 2 daughters and he was a single father. So she actually launched a GoFundMe that I think has raised something like $400,000 or something along those lines, because she was feeling that the corporation had done a disservice to that particular gentleman who had worked 27 years at that Burger King at a Las Vegas airport. I think he was at the Las Vegas airport, as I recall the story and everything.
And the community rallied and said, you know what? We don't want to applaud that behavior of not recognizing excellence and hard work. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to support you. And maybe it's just $1, maybe it's $5, but it shows that people are now saying, you know what? We want to honor people for their contribution and celebrate people. And I think we're seeing a generation, especially now, that is absolutely saying we need to accept people and love people for who they are. And let's just, and I talk about it from a personality perspective, but there's so many other lenses we have in this world of accepting others that are different from ourselves.
Yeah. And speaking of personalities, and this is something I was going to get to as well, as we still have a few more minutes, about 20 or so, to end the show and all that space. But one of the things I was curious about, and we talked about it on a number of shows, is, and this is for everybody, but I'll start with you, Beth, is that inner critic and that outer critic. Because in all this stuff that you 3 have done, including Marlene, who we had on earlier, it definitely takes some initiatives, but sometimes we are our own worst enemies. I know that there have been jobs that I have literally not gone for because I have talked myself out of said job, because you have those whole little dialogues with yourself. And then by the time you actually go to the hirer or the person that is giving you the job, or in your case, Beth, the book and everything, the publishers, they've already moved on to the next one and all in those lines. So I'm just wondering, Beth, how do you deal, one, with your inner critic, and do you have to face any of the outer critic? Because I know that sometimes our outer critics can also be very bad as well, because whether it be your spouse, your parents, or a number of others, they can give you all the reasons that you shouldn't be doing the things that you are doing. And sometimes they can serve as a deterrent to what could be an amazing outcome and all along those lines. So Beth, I'll start with you, but I'm going to hear from Eric and Adam as well. Have you had to deal with that inner critic, that inner voice that is telling you all the reasons that you shouldn't do the various things that you have done? And also, have you had enough of the support from your immediate friend and family circle, or there's those in those circles that are parroting, to borrow Merrick's terms, the negative aspect of what is going on?
Yeah, well, just speaking in terms of, right, I'm strictly speaking of writing in that realm. I'm so fortunate that I just have totally supportive people, and I'm really lucky in that regard. My husband, my friends, just my family, just really lucky on that front. And in terms of inner criticism and outer criticism, I think it's kind of like, it's a funny thing with writing. I think you kind of need, you need to pay attention to what, if you're putting together a story, or thinking through, trying to enter a character's mind. I think there's a place for criticism and to listen to it, but you also have to know when to shut it off, because I think when writing is at its best and you lose yourself in that world and you're not even your own headspace anymore, you're totally in this fictional world. That critic, you can't, you got to shut that off somehow. I don't know. Some days it's easier to do it than others, but I think that's really critical. But then there's a time and a place. For me, personally, I don't want to get any criticism on a novel until I have a complete first draft, because in the past, when I've given chapters away and I get criticism, I go into a rabbit hole and I never move forward with a piece. So when I've got a complete first draft, I want to get as many voices and opinions on that as possible. And that's really critical. I mean, that criticism there is just, and, I've been fortunate that I've, over the years, I've gotten, people who are very honest and good critics, but it's sort of beyond that, it's not like a personal attack or anything. It's very constructive criticism. And I really listen to that and take all that in. So that's a long answer to your question. I would just say, yeah, inner critic, outer critic, it's all there. It's kind of like, as a writer, trying to be in the driver's seat and thinking, when do I need to shut this off? When do I need to bring it in? And then how do I process it? So I think criticism has a place. And for me personally, I'm very lucky that the people in my life it's not the negative, it's very supportive and helpful. So.
Hey, Merrick, along the same lines, I definitely want to hear from Adam as well, but you also do some business coaching in the sense of both the business individuals, but also the business itself as well. So I am sure that there are some folks that you sometimes have to direct them to the reality of what they are getting into, because we know that there are some businesses that are not known for having a great success rate. But I don't think, as I'm hearing you talk, that you would be the type to tell somebody not to open a chili restaurant if that is their passion or something along those lines. You might give them some of the statistics and some of the reasons, things that they might want to consider. But I'm thinking, based on what I'm hearing from you, that you would be an encouraging person, even if you are giving them some hard, cold realities. Am I misreading you in that sense?
Absolutely. As a parent, I mean, I remember, there's this song, there's a more recent song out now, and it's called "The Loudest Critic in the Room," and you can probably guess who that person is. It's ourselves. It's not they're on stage. You think it's the audience, and it's not the audience. It's ourselves. I remember when I started my first company, I just gotten a master's degree in business. I graduated, and everybody is like, you should go and work for a company. You have an MBA. And I was like, nope, I'm starting my own company. I went to an accountant and he discouraged me. We went to a lawyer to set up the company and incorporate the business, and he discouraged me. And everybody I talked to discouraged me. And I thought, I'm doing it. And, I remembered at the time, I had read a lot about being an entrepreneur. And one of the things really stuck with me was the unsuccessful entrepreneur thinks they will be successful. The successful entrepreneur knows it. And years later, I kept going back to the accountant, and year after year, every year, you know what he said to me? He said, "You are my example." He said, I'm never, ever again telling someone that they should not start a company. Because this was back in about 1993. So this is 30 years ago when I started my first training and development company. And he just said it to me for years. He said, you taught me a lesson. Who am I to tell somebody not to start a company? And, there's something around having, I don't even like the word criticism. I think of the word feedback. It's let's provide honest and candid and real feedback that's useful and meaningful. But in the end, if you're following your bliss, you're following your passion, you do what has meaning to you, what's going to contribute to the world, what you love and what you're good at, you're going to be successful. It just takes a lot of work. There's a quote which I love. You can have anything you want in life. You may have to work for it, however. And I think you have to just put in the time and energy, and guess what? Good things happen.
Yeah, like you said, and sometimes that vision is going to be your vision, and sometimes even with that vision, which is another conversation we've had on this show and other shows as well, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about that. But I have two very proud examples in my own life and everything, and I have alluded to them before, but neither one of them had the background in what they did. The other did not have, the other two did not have the background. But my parents and those that have watched this show know that I have said this before, literally started a radio station, a jazz radio station in rural North Carolina, because they were frustrated that the minority voice wasn't being heard. And they were also frustrated that the rural voice wasn't being heard and some other voices weren't being heard. So even though Dad was trained in the military as an engineer, but not a radio engineer, and Mom was trained as a guidance counselor, none of them had a radio background or a media background whatsoever. But they saw, to your point, they saw a need and a desire to create it. So without any background, they went through the whole FCC process, got the station that stayed on for about 11 or 12 years or something along those lines. And the actual call letters are still around, because I think it was passed on to a community college and definitely some other folks. And then they had their own illustrious careers. Dad, who I mentioned, in art, and Mom in the nonprofit foundation world and all in that space. But they literally started it because they saw that vision and there was something that they felt was something that was needed and would be well received. And like I said, some of the finances, we're in the middle of a recession now, and some of those similar kind of things in the 70s and 80s, because that's when it was on. It came on in 76. It was on to about 87 or 88. But that was some of the things that caused that to go under, was the recession of that particular time. And then, like I said, my grandmother literally walked through the streets of Raleigh, our state capital here in North Carolina, and created the first African-American library because she saw a need. Once again, there was no library for that particular community, and she went ahead and created that library, which still exists to this day. So the Richard B. Harrison Library still exists even to this day and everything, but she literally was knocking doors in the 40s. And if you can think of a African-American light-skinned woman knocking on the doors in the 40s, this was not an easy thing to do, even in your own community, to try to get them to give money and everything. But that is something that she was able to pull off and succeed in that space. Adam, what is your thoughts around the inner critic and the outer critic as well?
Well, my inner critic, I'll tell you, man, is my nemesis. There's nothing you can say to me that I haven't already said to myself. And I've had to learn over the years to kind of ignore my inner critic a lot. My outer critic, to be honest with you, I'm highly blessed to have a family, a wife and kids. And my wife, she is so supportive to the point I call her my little enabler. Like, even if I come up with a bad idea, she's still, yeah, go for it. But as far as constructive criticism, I believe that is a great thing if used properly. Just being able to sit there and realize, all right, well, is this constructive or is this not? I've learned to be able to ignore, over the years, I've learned to be able to ignore negative criticism, especially dealing with a lot of social media. When we first started doing the podcast and we started getting into TikToks and social media, Facebook, of course, you're always going to have people post negative things. And, the first couple of times I read them, I was like, I can't believe they're saying that. But now I'm at the point where it's almost comical. I'll show guys I work with in Glory Bound and be like, you wouldn't believe what they said about this. Check this out. And kind of laugh it off. And you have to laugh it off because if you allow it to get inside your head, then, they've won initially. They've kind of thrown you off your game. So to be able to kind of be like a duck and let it just kind of flow off your back is where I'm at now.
That makes a lot of sense. Hey, along those same lines, I was just wondering all of y'all's thoughts about this, but I mentioned it earlier, the notion of vision. And a lot of people have their vision, but then sometimes the vision that you have isn't always the vision of the allies or some of the people that are in your circle and everything. And I know that there have been people that have felt that either their vision was stolen, meaning that people have taken their idea and run with it, or and maybe even run with it better than they would have because of whatever resources they may have had. And I think that is very cynical in the sense of those that sold the idea and all in that kind of space. But it is a very real thing that happens in business and in the world. And I also know that there are folks that will try to get you into their vision. So they will try to not co-opt your vision into their vision and not really see how it is playing into where your vision is and all along those lines. So Merrick, I'm sure that you've dealt as a business coach with both of those situations. And what is your advice to those that have run across those? Because I know that I have had friends that have come up with ideas and then the idea has been stolen. And I've also had friends that have heard a vision and they have a grandiose vision and they want you to fall underneath their grandiose vision, and it might not be where your direction is in the first place.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, if you have vision and you're worried about other people outperforming you, make them irrelevant. Just outperform them. You have the power to create what you want to create. Don't worry about what other people are doing. You can't control what other people do. The only thing you can control is what you do. So focus on what you're good at and make it happen, and make what they do not important. And in that case, you keep plugging ahead. And if you know where you want to go, I remember when I first started my company, I was I was starting a team building company back in around 1993. There were almost no team building companies in the United States. I had discovered team building while I was in grad school, and I thought I could get paid to play games with people. Sign me up for this. Like, this sounds fun. So, everybody's discouraging it. And I remember like it's about a first 2-year period. I was working 9 to 5 in my company every day. At night, I delivered pizza. And on the weekends, my parents owned a children's clothing store, and I worked at the store, and I sold children's clothes Saturday and Sunday. And I was working 7 days a week. And my friend said to me, "You are crazy. Like, come out to the movies with us. Let's go away for the weekend. Let's go have fun." And I said, "Nope, I'm starting a company and I'm making it happen." And they thought, like, you're nuts. Like, this is the prime of your life. You are missing having fun. Fast forward around 3, 4, 5 years later, and all my friends were like, "You are so lucky that you get to do what you love to do." And I thought, totally lucky, just happened randomly. And I, the reality is I had a vision. I knew what I wanted to do, and I did it. But it required a tremendous amount of effort and dedication. And to Adam's point, sometimes we just need to support the people around us. What you're doing is supporting youth and helping them and encouraging them. That's just what we need. We just need to be out there, surround the people around us with positivity, hold the vision, work towards the vision, and you make it happen. And if other people are trying to do the same thing, just work harder. Just make your vision a reality.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Everything I can definitely see that, and all along those lines. So definitely you have to kind of get your own reality and get their own thoughts in that way, and not necessarily be as concerned about what other people's thoughts are and what they are doing. But Beth, just really quickly, and out of curiosity, because I do know that there are in the literary field, there are those folks that are concerned that there are people that are less than scrupulous that will take an idea and run with it. I know that there have been a numbers of cases, some that have been won, some that have not been won, where people have been felt that their idea was stolen, whatever that idea was, and everything in that space. So I was wondering if that is ever a concern of yours, or if you haven't had that kind of experience, because I know a lot of times we will have these great creative ideas, and sometimes we may reveal more of them than we would like to reveal, and then you may see the idea come out as a movie or come out as something else. So just wondering if that was something that you ever faced as well, or is that something that only happens to the select few and not to as many as we think it happens to?
Yeah, I've definitely heard of those stories, but me personally, no. I mean, it's funny. Not really. It's funny. Like, I think about just the ideas of, I think, like, I'm not even going to get this quote right, but I think this is true of movies and books and so forth, that you could give any 3 writers or directors or artists an idea. Let's say, I'm thinking of what maybe one of your stories, Adam, about a kid who has this dream of playing basketball, and that have it so that the storyline goes so that the kid realizes that I love basketball, but I've got to broaden my life a little bit. You could give 3, 4, 5, countless different people that idea, and they would each create a different, unique story and a different perspective. So I think that that's kind of fascinating, actually, to see how one idea could get played out in different ways. And so, yeah, but for me personally, I've never experienced it. And I would maybe kind of echo something you said, Merrick, because I just think supporting, whatever anyone's vision or idea is, I think it's great when we can support each other. And, I think that there's, God only knows we need all that we can get in this world, right? So, I would really just echo that very strongly, what you said.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And America, along those same lines, but you have folks that are definitely doing some amazing thing in the business community and all in that kind of way. So what advice would you give for folks that are thinking that they wanted to start a business, since you do some business coaching? So what advice would you give to folks that are thinking that they want to start whatever the next business is, maybe the next hardware store, or maybe the next bicycle shop, or whatever they may have in their mindset? What advice would you give to folks that are contemplating going into business or an entrepreneurial business of one sort or another? And that's the point I was going to make. I knew there was something I was thinking about, and this ties into the question at all. But do you think that our school system, to kind of even what Adam was talking about, is too busy training us to not think about entrepreneurial opportunities, because I do think that sometimes our school system is too busy concentrating on getting a career or getting a job and not necessarily a career. Because to me, those are different. To me, a job is something that you go to, and a lot of people will work multiple jobs in order to survive. Kind of what you were talking about, Merrick, in the way that you did when you were a youngster. But a career, to me, is something that you have a passion for and a desire to be involved in. Like I would say that in my own life, I am very passionate about this whole live streaming space, as well as other aspects of media and event planning. So to me, those are careers. Now, I mentioned earlier that I work for Measurement. Measurement is something that I do to help pay the bills. And I have friends that literally drive Uber and drive for DoorDash, and that is something that they do to pay the bills. And that is more of a job. But I was just wondering your thoughts around some of those points that I was bringing.
I think that shows like Shark Tank have inspired a lot of people to be entrepreneurs and take their career in their own hands. So I think we're seeing a lot more entrepreneurs who are driving their careers and following their passion and doing what they want. And the advice that I tell people, and I've said this to many people, is you're not sure if this business is viable. So why don't you do this? Map it out. Lay out every single aspect of this business. If you were going to start a business, what should be all the things that you need to do to make this business viable? And this is what I did when I started my company when I was in grad school. I discovered team building. I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to map it out. I'm going to lay out the entire process of everything that needs to happen. And once that's done, I'll look at the plan and then I'll say, do I think I have something? And if you think you have something, you go for it. And if you look at it and go, you know, it felt like it was a good idea at the beginning, but now that I see it, there really are a lot of challenges. It's going to cost too much money. It's going to take too much time to ramp this up. This isn't really viable. Be honest with yourself, but go through the process of laying out the entire business plan and process, step 1, step 2, step 3, and then make the decision. Don't judge it until you're finished. It's just like Beth said, writing a book. I've written 5 books. I don't even touch editing them until the entire book is done, until it is out and finished. And then I go back and I say, now let me look at it. And I think that's true with business. Let's map it out, see if we think it's viable. And if it is, then you go for it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What advice would you give to folks, Adam, including those that are in the sports world and everything along those lines? So what advice would you give to folks that are thinking about that aspect of life? Because like I said, I know that the success rate is very low and everything, but there are a number of folks that might even be able to pull off being the next LeBron James, or maybe even the next one of what he's already got his son that's about to play. Maybe they'll be the first ones to play together and all in that space. But what advice would you give to those that are wanting to break into sports?
Really and truly, I try to always talk to the kids and tell them that, you know, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to tell you that you can't do something, that you're, you know, no matter how good you are or how, you know, there's always going to be somebody that says, well, this, you know, this person's better, that person's better. So I always have the, you know, there's a horses wear these blinders, and I always tell them to keep those blinders on, you know, wear your own type of blinders, to keep your eye on what you want to do. And of course, you know, when you find people along the way that have been where you're at or where you want to be, to always take advice from them, to be willing to those are the people you need to listen to. Those people that have been where you want to go, not the ones that are behind you. That's the type of advice I always give is, you know, and never think that anything's going to be given. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. A lot of times, especially in the sports world, you get caught up with a lot of people taking advantage of young players, saying, "Hey, listen, if you'll come play over here, well, we can give you this, this, and this." You know, the key aspect is the whole goal in life is to get the education. To what's the next step to become the entrepreneur. You know, don't get sidetracked with these people that are going to offer you fortune or fame, and hey, you know, we'll have you on a music video, and hey, you know, you'll have your own tennis shoes or whatever. Get the main things in life that count, the things that are going to propel you. Don't go for the flashy. just, that's the kind of stuff that I encourage. And, I think it's funny, the question that you had before about what do you do when you see people say that they have, somebody stole their idea and things, I've seen that a lot in a pastoral sense, especially with dealing with kids and different programs like that. It's rampant in large churches and whatnot. And my thought has always been on that is, if it is meant for you, then nobody will be able to outshine you. If that is your idea, if that is what you are meant to do, then nobody's gonna be able to top you. So it doesn't matter if they try or not. That's always been, those type of situations have always been a gift. And if it's gifted to you, great. And if it's not, then accept that, move on. Don't dwell on, well, this person did it this way, I could do it better, kind of thing. And that's the way I've always thought of it and encouraged it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You're going to wind down very shortly and everything. But Beth, what advice would you give in that same space to those that are thinking that they want to get into writing and all along those lines? Because a number of people, as I mentioned earlier, think that they want to write. So what advice would you give to those that are thinking that they have that next great novel in their head, whatever that next great novel is?
Yeah, I think just, keep at your writing. I mean, I think one of the things, it may sound like an obvious thing, but read a lot of, I'm speaking of writing fiction, read a lot of fiction, read a lot of books, and just try to just put the time in, build your writing community or support group, your people who are going to be able to offer you some critique and support, and just keep at it. And one of the things you have to, this could be a whole other discussion, but if you're going to try to put your writing out in the world, rejection is just part of that. So just, keep getting, work at your craft, get feedback, keep improving, keep writing, keep reading, and be stubborn. I guess that's what I'm saying. Just be stubborn and keep at it. And when the rejections come in, if you'll learn, I think from the rejections. Sometimes you'll say, hey, I hadn't really thought about that. I should think about changing that or working on that. And sometimes, it's just a matter of a piece isn't for a particular publisher, and you just like, okay, I'm going to lob that one out there again. So I think just persistence and work, and it's not very romantic in a way. You just kind of have to be stubborn, forge ahead, and have your community for sure.
No doubt. Like I said, Gary, to wrap up and everything, and I'm going to ask that same question that I asked Marlene earlier to all three of you and everything. But Merrick, just really quickly, as you were the first person on the show and you were talking about that visualization and all in that space in the corporate world, I was actually thinking to myself, I was wondering, and being slightly sarcastic and a little bit tongue-in-cheek here and everything, but all three of you, as I've heard you speaking, are in the married and relationship status, and at 61 I'm still looking for that significant other. So maybe I can visualize and materialize that person using that same structure and all along those lines. So does it work in relationships the way it works in business, or can I write down all the qualities and everything and get this person before 62 or 63 or 65 at the latest, since I just hit 61 back in July?
Right. It's funny. I talk a lot about relationships and personality as well. And even though I kind of live in this corporate world, whenever I finish a talk and I'm off stage and I'm talking to people, they always come over to me and talk about their spouse or their kids. I was just talking about how to use this in the workplace, and then they have questions about their spouse or kids. And the funny thing is that opposites attract. And so it's always interesting to see what our own style is, because the parrot, that high energetic, enthusiastic style, overwhelmingly is married to that logical, analytical owl. And the direct, assertive eagle, overwhelmingly married to that soft-spoken, reserved dove. In fact, a study recently said 86% of the time that is true. We're drawn to that kind of personality opposite. So you got to think about your style, figure out which you are, Mark, and then figure out, all right, if this is my style, what am I looking for? And then you manifest that.
It sounds like that's what you just said. And I think earlier I said that I was feeling, based on your description, that I might be closer to the parrot or maybe the eagle. So if I'm a parrot, I guess I got to go continue looking for those wise old owls and all in that space. So maybe that's what I got to do, is continue looking for the wise old owl lady and all along those lines. So that's what it seems like you are saying in that sense. I'll start with Beth and then go around and everything. But as I said to everybody on the show, if folks can how you can be reached. And like I said, it is a global network, Pod TV is. So any message, and we've been spreading a lot of messages of positivity and hope that you would like to give to our global community. I'm sure that folks would love to hear that from everybody. So I'll start with you, Beth, and then go to you, Adam, and then close out with Merrick. So any thoughts about message of positivity and how you can be reached? And as I told Marlene earlier, we'd love to have y'all come back on another online dinner party. It's just a fun conversation we have every Wednesday. And as I told all of you in our correspondences back and forth, it's just a casual conversation. And like my vision of what a real dinner party would be like if you were at a home as opposed to the apartment life that I am currently living in. It's just us having fun conversations and learning and gathering information from each other, but also building community, to your point, Beth, and building friendships as well. So definitely, I hope that all of you feel that you're part of a greater family community and that you will continue talking to each other, and that even up here on future shows in the not too distant future as well. But Beth, I turn it over to you.
Yeah, I think just echoing what you said, I mean, the piece of wisdom, such as it is that I pass on is, keep, find the people that, you love, reach out and find people that you love and connect with, keep them close and keep connected to them. I think that's, I just value my friends and loved ones more than anything else. And I think, just that's more important than anything. And in terms of how to reach me, I'm at the website bethcastrodale.com, and you can find a way to contact me through that and just learn more about me and my books if you'd like. So that's it.
Sounds good. Adam, how about yourself? Any words of wisdom you have for the global community and how folks can reach you as well?
Well, first I want to thank you guys for the time and opportunity. I appreciate everything that you guys have shared. And of course, we can, I Am Glory Bound can be reached in every social media platform there is, podcast. And final words would be, just don't waste any day. Every day is an opportunity to get better and better. Every day I have on my cell phone at midnight, it goes off, new grace, new opportunity. And that's what I live by every day when I wake up is every day is a new amount of grace and a new opportunity. And that's my message I want to leave with everybody.
All right, sounds good. Mary, you started off with myself at the beginning and everything, but ways that you can be reached and any words of wisdom that you have. And by the way, I'll close out with something that I'm sure Adam will enjoy, and I've closed it out before, but it is a 3-minute poem that deals with coaches and the importance of coaches and teachers that a friend of a friend gave me access to, and I sometimes use it to close out this particular show because it definitely fits in a lot of our conversation, and hopefully y'all will stick around and hear at least part of it because I think it is very pertinent all in that line. But before I get to that, any message of positivity and hope that you've got for our global community as well as ways that you can be reached?
Yeah, I'll tie it to the personalities that I was talking about earlier. I always tell people, find a career, a path, or just a hobby or an interest that allows your personality to shine. When you are working within your style, it feeds your soul. It energizes you every single day. When you're working out of your personality and you have to act in ways that are just not natural or comfortable, it's exhausting and draining. So whether you're talking to youth, Adam, and you're talking to people about just how do you inspire them to be their best, but within their style. Imagine a parrot who I get to be on stage and I just love it. But can you imagine a parrot who is sitting in a cubicle every day, writing computer code? I would be exhausted at the end of the day. So you got to find a path that just lets your personality shine, and you will feel excited and about what you're doing every day of your life. And to reach me, you can catch me at merrickrosenberg.com. You can see books and the training programs that my company offers and the speaking that I do. And I just love to share the message of just being the best you can be and letting your personality shine.
Definitely a great way to end the show and everything. And like I said, I'm going to bring up this video that's about 3 minutes long that is definitely about the importance of coaches and mentors. But definitely, as I said earlier, hope that all of you will make a return trip, just like I hope that Marlene will as well, and some of the other guests that we've had on this show during the run so far of this show. And it's been going on for almost 2.5 years. So definitely had some great conversations, and I'm looking forward to continue these powerful conversations on a regular basis. But I definitely think that folks will enjoy this as we get ready to head out the door and maybe grab some real food, since it's been a dinner party and it's time for me to go get my real dinner and all along those lines. But definitely enjoyed our time and our company and hope that you will make that return trip. But right now, let's hear this gentleman's thoughts around coaches and mentors.
The difference between thinking and doing and living in the 21st century. They teach us about being a real quarterback-oriented games. We don't have to just use video games and live in the shadows of good things because of them. We grow up with agility far larger and bigger than we are tall. Parents are the champions and have to be our first life coaches and know-it-alls. Who knows how this came to be? Coaches will ask you if you know your right foot from your left, if you know yourself, if you act knowingly good or bad, if you can move and negotiate a field with style and form, if you can tackle or throw a pass, or if your last name is that of a clown, if you can let someone know on the team that you are in trouble before you cause yourself or someone else trouble. If you are ready to learn teamwork or aware that you started out today with your pants down or your sportsmanship was left on the kitchen table, if you know the social studies, the alphabets, science, music, characters, and the stats and the numbers of a great student player eligible to stay on the team, and if you know the poise of great athletic champions and their scientific attitudes that are historical or music to us now, if you have the swag of the game, the discipline, the performance, and artistic form down pat, and if you have the style of gymnastics that the sport has with life, if you have the work ethic and determination to make it all seem easy and not a game at all, if you have the knowledge of all the above, or you don't know things like this even make the difference. I think that when it comes to the importance of parents and their field and self-knowledge, wisdom, virtues, and courage, their teachings, love, respect, care that they illustrate on the field and in the grind of life with their actions and their ideas, experiences, muscle, and strategic magic and skills wrapped around us with their priceless love. For their verbs to be that make us winners in this hard and fast third century that without them, kids and adults, athletes could hardly see or do anything at all. Parents teach us the difference between playing video games and playing on the field. Parents teach us how to be champions. A huge hug should go to parents, coaches, and parent-like community people who have love on the field for you and who are champions for your life, both in and out the games.